income as an asset is so important, because your income's not going to turn you into a millionaire. You're not going to stumble upon an investment that's going to go to the moon overnight. What you need to do with it is you need to establish, okay, this is what I earn on a monthly or an annual basis, and I need to think about ways in which I can use that to the best of my ability to build wealth over the long term. That means when I am old, I am comfortable and I don't have, essentially I don't have financial troubles. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mouthy Money podcast. I am joined, as ever, by my good co-host, Chris Chu, who is Head of Consumer Finance at communications consultancy MRM. Chris, hello, how are you doing?
Ed, I'm good. How are you?
Yes, very well, thank you. Very busy. Lots going on out there in the world that I think we would probably spend hours talking about. But we've got, I think, actually quite an interesting topic today, and it's not something that I've come across until quite recently. And actually, one of the biggest proponents or voices out there on this is a huge financial influencer in the US called Dave Ramsey, who some people might be aware of. Very much an American audience, though, I think. So for us Brits on this side of the pond might not be as familiar with. But it's this concept of your income is your biggest asset. Now, what does that mean? I think we're going to explore that today. We're also going to look at, I think, something that's really important as an aspect of that, which is the issues around hustle culture that kind of promises you things that are not necessarily favorable to that idea. And just some of the ways in which we can look at our income as an asset that we can either use or misuse, and what we should be thinking about in terms of building wealth over the long term and using that income to our advantage. So starting on that, let's think about what we mean by income as an asset. What comes to mind for you when I say that to you, Chris?
What comes to mind? Income as an asset. Well, it's obviously the biggest form of money flow that I have that is going to help me to build my future. So, like any asset that you hold, you're hoping that it will help you to plan and build your wealth, right? So if I have an income through work or through other means, that's probably my best vehicle engine to try and build a future for myself and for my family. That's kind of how I'm reading. Is that right, Ed? Is that how is that what you're driving at, or is there more sort of ins and outs to that? Yeah,
look, when we use the words like asset, people think of stocks or bonds are an asset class. Physically, gold that we've talked about recently is an asset class. But actually, your income is an asset and we're talking about it in the broader sense of your income is a tool that is available to you to help you achieve things, right? And what really matters is how you use that tool to its best effect. So I think what's really important within that is not falling prey to people who potentially promise you rewards without risk, or everything upside and that kind of thing. And so there's a huge online culture of this kind of hustle culture, and some of that's good. And I think, Chris, you've got some views on where it's good and bad. And then it's easy for that hustle culture that you see online to devolve into what is effectively, and I hate to use the phrase, but I will, that kind of get rich quick mentality where people promise things and say to you, yeah, if you just do this one thing, boom, job done. You can set up £1 million business in a year kind of thing, and you'll be rich. You'll be a millionaire. You can kick it all in and all this kind of stuff. So I think that's what's really important to kind of stress with that hustle culture. But you've got some views around hustle culture, right?
Yeah, I have. There's no shortcuts, right? And I think what you said there in terms of the people who are sharing all this wisdom online may be doing it out of the kindness of their hearts. But I think I would question why they're, telling me this on TikTok rather than actually going and doing it themselves and living on some island. Get rich quick is as old as time, I suppose. The tulip speculation bubble and things like that, people have kind of fallen into these traps where it's like there's a shortcut to fortune and all my problems will be solved. I think the slightly more complex, so a lot of the language and the lingua franca around that is discussions around hustle culture, right? You need to be doing your best to diversify income streams, and you need to be working harder. And this, I could talk for ages on this, Ed. I've been reading quite a lot, a philosopher called Byung-Chul Han. Stay with me, listeners. He's written a few really interesting short philosophical works, but one is from 2018, I believe, is called The Burnout Society. In that, he talks at length about how one of the offshoots of neoliberalism, going back as far as Reaganism and Thatcherism, and as early sort of start of that, and then moving into what we would perhaps term neoliberalism today, has been this idea that everybody has to become an entrepreneur of the self. So in the old days, it was the factory manager or it was the owner of the farm that kept you in line and made sure that you were motivated to work, and did so by metaphorically, or maybe in some cases literally, cracking the whip to make sure that you were productive economically. But there was a change at the end of the 20th century where suddenly there was a subtle shift of that pressure back onto all of us. So you need to be an entrepreneur of the self. It's all about and one of the things he talks about, the only thing that kind of stopping you from being a billionaire is your attitude, right? That's one of the things that is often implied in a lot of the content that you've touched on there around this kind of hustle culture, right? Just got to get your mindset right and everything will fall into place. And by the way, I've got the right scheme for you to be able to do that. That is really toxic to an individual, I think. That leads to, as the title of the work suggests, burnout. That leads to toxic comparisons with other people, guilt about why you're not achieving what you think you should be achieving. It can strain relationships. It can lead to isolation, and it can lead to an illusion of productivity as well, where you're kind of chasing down dreams but not actually sitting down and doing the productive things that are going to be able to drive you forward. And part of that is kind of neglecting long-term planning. So to your point, if it's get rich quick, or if you just do these few things, and if you chase this elusive dream, then you'll end up becoming richer than your wildest dreams, and you just have to work harder than everybody else and it will happen. That sort of neglects to mention that there's huge slices of luck in this sort of stuff, and expertise and nous that have been built up over many years to make sure you're in the right place at the right time to take advantage of the situation. Now, that's not to say that hustling per se is a bad thing. If you got a very driven mindset, then you can develop your career very quickly. It can give you a sense of purpose and ownership, and give you a sense of, well, I'm able to kind of go out and impact the world around me, which can be a good thing, and give you a strong work ethic and keep you disciplined. And then from a sort of straight financial point of view, if you are really committed and are able to set some things up, it can give you multiple income streams, which, is going to help you to become more kind of financially resilient, and maybe help you to attain some skills rapidly and advance your career. But I would caution all those other points I raised before about, how true is it to be chasing these things, and actually, are we better off thinking about what we have at our disposal already and maximizing that to its full potential, which goes back to your point, Ed, around, think about your income that you've got now and how can you make that work harder as a starting point,
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting thing in there, actually, and to go deep on the philosophy, because as much as it sounded at the start there like you're about to drift into Marxism, but I'll let it go today.
Not quite.
No, I think I know I mentioned Dave Ramsey at the outset of the podcast, but I think there's an interesting thing in there where it's this cross-cultural contamination from America is also a part of this. And there's that famous quote, and I can't remember off the top of my head, I'd have to go check Google, where Americans are Americans who are in poverty I'm about to absolutely destroy the quote here, but it's like Americans who live in poverty are all temporarily embarrassed millionaires or something like that. And it's that American dream of anybody can make it big, anybody can get rich, anybody can become wealthy and join, the elite or whatever it is. All they have to do is have that one great idea, and America will help them unlock it. And I think us Brits here are culturally quite allergic to that sort of mindset. It's a bit kind of like, it's a bit brash, and we don't want to talk about money. And, almost in a sense, this is why we have this podcast where we talk about wealth, and we talk about it with a heavily British voice, I would call it. We're bad at talking about it, so we need to talk about it more and have that conversation with each other about, actually, well, I'm doing this to improve my long-term prospects, be that income or whatever, and trying to work harder and earn a better income as a starting point is a really core part of that. So I think what I'm trying to say with this is that, and this goes back to the hustle culture thing, where it promises the idea of riches, right? But we have to be realistic about what we have in front of us. And this is why income as an asset is so important, because your income's not going to turn you into a millionaire. You're not going to stumble upon an investment that's going to go to the moon overnight. What you need to do with it is you need to establish, okay, this is what I earn on a monthly or an annual basis. And I need to think about ways in which I can use that to the best of my ability to build wealth over the long term. That means when I am old, I am comfortable and I don't have, essentially don't have financial troubles. So this is why we want this income as an asset idea. It matters, because once you understand that actually income is something that's really important to you, and not just for paying your bills or paying your mortgage or whatever, but is this tool that you can use to build long-term wealth, changes the nature of that. When we talk about that, have a plan, make a plan, it establishes that, okay, what do I do with this? What do I have? And what can I do? And I think that's really, really important. And it certainly made me think a bit harder about, is my income doing enough?
Yeah, no, I think, again, listen, as I said before, we create finance content. Obviously, I consume quite a lot of it and pay attention to a lot of it. And a lot of the kind of hustle culture around that, first and foremost, it is a culture. So people kind of buy into it. It's almost like a cultural identity. You're a grinder and all this kind of stuff. But what I'm often struck by when I look at these kind of things is, like you said, the kind of get rich quick scheme, but also that it prioritizes quick financial gains over long-term financial literacy, like the basic building blocks of somebody who's going to be able to create a better life for themselves. And I'm not saying that you're not going to find, I know you said there, you're not going to find that one investment that goes to the moon. Look, you might. And if you do, good luck to you. And if you found that alchemy, then great. You accuse me of being a dyed-in-the-wool Marxist earlier. I believe in a slightly fairer taxation system, but aside from that, I'm not storming the barricades on 17th of October or whatever. However, I do think, in terms of sort of building blocks and gradually increasing your wealth, then there are no shortcuts. It is hard graft. You need to learn as you go along. You need to rely on sensible voices that are going to help you. And most people don't get that, like you say, to the moon investment, or strike it lucky with a business idea that means that they never have to work again. There's always going to be something that means you have to engage with this. And so the more literary, the more, the better your financial literacy, the more you're able to kind of get better outcomes. And as we talked before about investing being and the compounding effect, I truly believe that good decisions compound as well, and bad decisions compound, without sounding like a hustle culture individual. But it's just like, if you make good decision followed by another good decision followed by another good decision, then gradually things are going to start heading in the right direction for you. So you just need to make sure that you're aware of all of the sort of context around what those decisions you're making are, and understand yourself, understand what it is that's important to you, and then understand what you're doing it for. And then, as we've had other sort of podcasters talk about before that, you can have a 10, 15, 20-year plan, which you should, but actually have a 3-year plan and then be comfortable with the decisions that you made in those 3 years because they were moving towards a certain thing, and then don't beat yourself up about the outcome. And that's where I think that hustle culture is analogous to burnout. And that's why I mentioned the Burnout Society of Ben Chauhan's work, because I do think you end up beating yourself up for something that could largely be unobtainable. And actually, some of the stuff we're talking about, a comfortable retirement, being able to own your own property, being able to provide your kids a start in life, that's not unobtainable. It's not easy to get hold of, but if you have the right principles and you apply, like you said, with your income as your asset, and think carefully about how you allocate that, you can certainly find yourself in a far better position in 10 years' time than you would be now, or that you would expect to be in now, by sort of crossing your fingers and hoping that you're going to come across the next big investment idea that's going to take all the pain out of that. For most of us, it's all about hard work and hard graft and making good decisions, right?
Yeah. There's practical aspects to the idea as well. And I think this is one of Dave Ramsey's things about it, is when you think about your income in that way, and it's something precious that you shouldn't just be handing over to other people, it changes how you think about stuff like debt. I mean, personally, I've had in the past terrible experience with things like credit cards. I've never got into like real trouble, but I've used credit cards. I particularly when I first went to live in London and I was on a pretty tight income, I used a credit card to get by. It took me a long time to get myself out of that situation. Even extending to things like student loan. This is now the Money exclusive, Chris. I will tell you, I've just finished paying off my student loan.
Oh, congratulations. Fantastic.
Yeah, I know. Now the Money exclusive right here.
There we go. Suddenly the investing ramps up. Here we go. More gold being bought, listeners, as we speak.
All that extra income now no longer going to the student loans company, etc. I'm not on one of those absolutely mad £9,000 a year loans, fortunately, so I was able to pay it off in a reasonable amount of time. But yeah, it's kind of, okay, I've paid my student loan off. That's brilliant. It's an extra few £100 in my pay every month coming back to me as a result. Brilliant. So the question is, what do I do with that? Do I just start spending it on crap I don't need, or whatever, do I just start spending it on stuff that doesn't really matter in my life? Or do I immediately take that extra income, which, as we've established, is so powerful, and direct that towards a lifelong goal, be that putting it in my son's junior ISA, topping up my pension, starting a stocks and shares ISA that I'm actually meaningfully contributing to over a long period of time, and just establishing that rhythm over a long time. It's so easy to achieve small victories like that, paying off a student loan, and then not consolidating that victory into something bigger. It's a tactical mistake that strategically you will pay for in future. Starting to sound like Napoleon here, but
you're not going to invade Russia, are you?
No, what?
Don't bite off more than you can chew. Just start a stocks and shares ISA, Ed.
My finances at times have looked like the retreat from Russia, perhaps, but
winter descended on it, has it? Yeah, there we go. This is getting very niche now, listeners.
Yeah, General Winter. We've got to stop talking about Marx and Russia. This is very strange.
It's all got a bit weird. So, listen, one of the things I would say, my parents were, we never had a lot of money growing up, so I think we covered in a lot of other podcasts, but we were allergic to debt, allergic to credit. It was just like, credit cards are the spawn of Satan, get them away from me, we'll manage somehow. And sometimes we really did struggle with that. But that's taught me a huge debt discipline. Like, I think very carefully about any debt that I'm willing to take on. My mortgage is obviously one, and I've taken a view on that. Student loan, I was able to pay that off quite quickly, actually, just because the way my career went early on. So I was kind of lost that sort of particular millstone quite quickly. So I was pleased with that. But anything else, it's like credit cards paid off immediately, because, like you say, it's just a case of it's slowing you down. It's absolutely slowing you down. And listen, not everyone's in that position. And I'm not sat here on my high horse telling everyone who's in debt, tut, 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 you shouldn't be. Circumstances dictate, I think. But whatever you can do to create those small victories. And one of those is, like you say, treating your income as an asset. So there's certain essentials that you have to spend on, which are going to support the lifestyle that you want to lead. And ultimately, and all of this is what money is for, right? Is to kind of create the lifestyle and the future that we want. The lifestyle today and in the future that we want. But, ultimately, it's a case of you needing to make sure that you're not stunting your ability to do that by taking on things that you don't need or spending on things you don't need. And that's where hard decisions need to be made. And actually, I'm in that situation now. There's a few things I'm looking at and reappraising where I'm like, I pay £75 a month for my TV subscription to watch sports. I'm like, do I have time for that? Do I still need, I'm a massive sports fan, but that's quite a bit of money that I could be putting into other areas. And I think regularly on a quarterly basis, I'll just reevaluate that and see if my priorities are changing and what's going on with that, and see if it can be used elsewhere. So I think I already adopt, in fairness, without sort of having the language around that you've talked about, Ed. I have always seen that as, this is my fastest route to the lifestyle that I want. It's the biggest asset that I've got, maybe alongside or aside my house. So I have to take it deadly seriously. And I've always been, allergic to debt and very keen on making sure that every penny counts where it can. So, yeah, I think it's basic principles, right? But when you're in this culture where all these other sort of fast tracks are talked about and there's a lot of guilt thrown around about you should be doing more or what's your side hustle, and then you add in cost of living pressures, inflation on everything, and people stretching to try and maintain something in their lifestyle, then actually you end up in a place where it's quite easy to see why some of those messages around hustle culture become easier to fall prey to, or to internalize more too much. And then you end up, maybe not concentrating on what you've got in front of you, as we said.
Yeah. It's about having agency with your money, isn't it? And you alluded to it there. There's two sides to it. Ultimately, it's, my income is X and my costs are Y. How can I make Y smaller and how can I make X bigger, right? So there's two sides to the coin. It's Can you cut your costs anyway? That's very difficult to do in the modern age. We have inflation at 4%. There are certain things you simply have to pay for. I have to pay my mortgage. I have to pay my council tax bill. I have to pay my water bill. And when it comes to growing my income, that's another issue altogether. I have to have an employer who is able to help me grow my income. I have to be able to make that case to my employer where if I want to grow my income. Can I show them that I've achieved X, Y, and Z in order to necessitate that? One of the best ways people have ultimately of growing their income is by moving jobs. The employment market, it doesn't look amazing at the moment. Is that avenue open to people? These are all kind of questions that feed into it. And it's not necessarily, okay, well, you need to make these decisions and pull a trigger, because stability is also really important. Stability matters when we're trying to have a plan and make that plan work. Doing it in an unstable environment really matters too. So you can't just rock the ship unnecessarily, but it's being aware of those factors and how important they are and how it feeds into the overall direction of travel, I guess you could call it, right?
Yeah, good decisions come from stability, right? You need to have broadly speaking, I suppose you can get stuck in a rut is the counter to that. But if you're in a stable situation, then you're not under pressure and therefore you can probably think clearer. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. And that's something I've always kind of tried to reach in my financial life and in my general life, which is stability is important because you're going to make better decisions with all of that kind of stuff. The other thing I think is celebrate the little victories. So, and that's the other thing is that, onto sort of the psychological and emotional aspects of it. A lot of that hustle culture and that thing I talked about in terms of the burnout society is it's all on you. You're failing. You're not achieving what it is you need to achieve. You could have a bigger house. You could have a bigger car if that's important to you. It's not to me, but you can achieve the things you want to achieve. Your mindset's just wrong. Your attitude's just wrong. It's like, well, no, it's not. You're busy. You're working hard. You might be raising a family. You might not. You've got other things you want. Life is short. You want to kind of enjoy it where you can. So when you do something that points towards, future you and future people that you're planning your wealth around having a better outcome, take stock for a minute and celebrate that. I think that's an important thing. And then also keep learning, keep trying to understand everything that goes into making good financial decisions and what that context looks like. Because that's the other thing we have to say working in our industry, Ed, which is it's so overcomplicated for so many people. And actually the challenge which we're trying to do in this is to try and break it down simply for people to say it's not unobtainable. To have these sort of things, you just need to understand the vehicles that are available to you. And like you say, one of the change maybe the way you think about this stuff, and your thing about your income being your biggest asset, I think is a good way to look at it. So, well, if I've got this asset, how best do I employ it to improve my future and to, enrich my present? Good place to start from, I think, and making sure everything's stable, start there and then build from there.
Yeah. I think that's a good sentiment to bring things to a close on. Very keen to hear people's views on this, pushing back against hustle culture and all this sort of stuff and the crazy stuff that people claim works, but obviously doesn't. We're keen to hear people's experiences with that and views on it. And this idea of your income as an asset. Do you look at it like that? Are we barking completely up the wrong tree? And also things like, what have you done to grow your income or cut your costs? Everything we've talked about. Very, very keen to hear from you. So do give us a shout in the comments. We do try and respond to commenters as well. Keep the conversation going. We want to hear from you. That's it. Thank you, Chris, as ever.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Don't invade Russia tonight, Ed.
I'll try not to. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Do give us a like and a subscribe. All your support is greatly appreciated. With that, I shall say thank you and goodbye.